Why do you think some people choose to keep re-enlisting or stay in for the long haul, and why do some decide to get out, do you think?
I would say I think a lot of people stay in because they feel like it's their best option or that they wouldn't have a lot of options on the outside. I know when I was getting out, I had people tell me like that I wasn't going to make it on the outside. It's hard in the civilian world, and I think they scare some people into believing that, or that they won't have anything, or they'll be poor or homeless if they get
Right.
out. I think some people genuinely love it. They like it. They like what they do. They are satisfied. They believe they have career options. So I think it's different for everybody. I know a lot of people that just want to get out. They did their, one or two enlistments. They got their GI Bill, and that was their plan all along. So, and they just get out and move on to their next thing.
Okay.
I wonder, I think if I would have joined straight out of high school and it was all I had known, I think it would have been harder to get out if that's all I've ever done my whole life versus, already having a college degree, planning to go to school and do something else. For me, I think the decision came a little easier.
Right. Yeah, I think there's definitely there's probably got to be a statistic out there somewhere. The people that end up staying in for 20 years, like what percentage of those people like started right out of high school, and maybe was that one of the reasons why they decided to stay in. Um, do you guys believe that you could kind of tell right away when you were in that's going to be a lifetime soldier, or that person might not even make it their whole enlisted time?
I think at boot camp, it's kind of obvious to tell who was prepared for the military lifestyle and who wasn't. Um, I kind of followed some of them through their careers on Facebook, and um, I think it's easier to tell who's not going to be a lifer than who is.
Right.
Um, I think some people just kind of have the attitude and the mentality for it, and some don't. You know, they. I was just surprised at boot camp how many people couldn't get up and couldn't be on time or couldn't do something as simple as like fold your underwear into this little square.
Right.
Like it's not hard,
Yeah.
but they couldn't do it.
Especially when you're doing it every day for
Right.
like
So it's
4 months.
if you can't even fold your underwear right, like how are you gonna
Yeah.
how are you gonna keep going? And yeah, the one girl specifically that I'm thinking of, I knew she wouldn't be a lifer, and she was actually the same rate as me in the Navy, so I went to A school with her as well, and yeah, I knew she wouldn't be a person that would stay in. I was surprised she made it through the first enlistment. So
Yeah.
yeah.
I mean, I've also seen some real bad soldiers turn out to be some real excellent, soldiers. So
Right.
I think, it can also do well for those that might have been lost or not really, maybe not came with the greatest set of skills, and then it came to them and it turned out really well for them, I think.
Yeah, I think there's definitely some soldiers that surprise you when they come in and they're like, this guy's not going to make it. And then, I've been out for over 15 years now, and they're still in. I'm like, God, that one was a surprise.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Tell me about your transition home. What was that like? And did you have a plan going forward? Did you have something that you had in mind?
So for me, I feel like I've always had a plan. I'm like an overthinker. I always have a plan. It takes me like 2 years to buy something that's expensive because I overthink everything. So I was always, this is what I'm going to do with my life as far as a career goes, and always make small adjustments, of course, when things come up. But I always had a plan.
Do you feel like you've been like that, even like when you look back at yourself in high school?
I would say so, yeah. I mean, obviously, what I was, thought I was gonna be a pharmacist, and then I took chemistry, and I was like, well, that ain't gonna work out for me. But so I've always, I've always had a plan where I was always looking for something more. So even getting out, I had a plan of what I was gonna do when I got out. Now I also had a great support system where, if my plan failed, and I could end up sleeping on my parents' couch, no issues, no questions asked. Whereas that's probably the same for a lot of people, but I know for many that's not. If their plan falls through, they might be on the streets.
Right.
And then where do you go from there?
And then, if they don't have family, they're going to need resources. And if they don't have resources, if they don't have a good counseling referral, you know, exactly where else did they go?
And like, so I was guard too. So like I said, I was, you know, part civilian. So I always had one foot in each. So when I went back to civilian life, it was, you know, so the transition, I can't say that I had any problems with it. Whereas for others, I'm sure that's, you know, if all you've known is this military and this is what you do day to day, I would assume that'd be a lot harder. I was also, you know, I was single, I didn't have kids. So that's another thing I can't, you know, I think it'd be a lot harder.
Yeah, for me, I knew I was going to get out right before I got to my last duty station, so I had 2 years to kind of prepare and plan. I started saving, so I was ready financially. I had been accepted into college already, so I knew where I was going to go to college. I had the GI Bill all set up already. I had my wrestling scholarship set up already, so I knew what I was going to have to pay for financially and what I wasn't going to have to pay for. I moved back home into my brother's house, so that was nice. I, you know, had a place to go with all my stuff, and obviously paid him, but I know I had the support system of my family. I knew what I was going to do. I had my plan. So I think that part was good. Emotionally, I did have a little bit hard of a time adjusting because I graduated high school at 17. I went to college and it's like, nope.
Right. So that'll go to my next question. Kind of, you're already sort of headed in that direction. Did you have any struggles at all transitioning? And if you did, what were those struggles?
Yeah, so like I said, I graduated high school. I went straight to college young. I went to college for 2 years and dropped out to join the Navy and go see the world. So kind of like she had mentioned, that was what I knew. You know, that was the only really job I'd ever had, minus like fast food in high school. So it was hard, and you know, some days I'd wake up and be like, man, is my plan gonna work out? You know, like, I mean, there's a lot of unknowns. I went back to college full time, so luckily it only took me a year to graduate. I was on a college wrestling team, so I was kind of back into being told what to do and having like curfews and rules and stuff, which was nice at times, but I was also 31 years old. So it was a little hard to be like told what to do, but
31 when you got out?
I was 31 when I got, or 30 when I got out, and then I started wrestling at college when I was 31. So, you know, that was a little hard, and you know, being a full-time student back on campus with a bunch of 18 to 22-year-olds was difficult. You know, and I got together with my now husband, and I mean, we had kind of dated long distance, and I got married during my first year at Midland, right before my first wrestling tournament of the season. So I kind of put a lot on my plate at the same time. Became a stepmom, you know, right off the bat. So I don't know if it helped or hurt me to kind of, you know, go from the military and then put all these other things on my plate. Like the biggest fear is, you know, not knowing if the plan's going to work out. You know, coming from the military, you kind of live a certain life and have a certain demeanor to you. At least, you know, I felt that I kind of always had to be like the tougher kind of like alpha female. And then when you get out, and that's not how most women are,
Or
it's difficult.
right.
Especially going into the workplace, it was like, well, you're kind of blunt or pushy or bitchy even. So it was rough. I'm just confident in myself now, and I'm happy with where I'm at in my life. So
Yeah, you know, that makes me think, you know, we all have to sort of figure out how to change our lifestyle or our demeanors when we get back into the civilian world. I think it's easier for a man because men are men. We're supposed to be blunt. We're supposed to be, you know, upfront about things, or our demeanor is different. But for women, you know, not only do you have to figure out how to transition back home, but it's like almost like you have to figure out how to transition back into a woman, if that makes sense.
yeah, for sure.
You know, would you agree? Am I off on that?
You know, I don't have kids, so I really can't say anything, but you know, I'll be in conversation with mom and I'm like, you know, I tell that kid this and this, and she's like, that's just the military and you're talking.
Yeah.
You know, just because yeah, like you kind of said, blunt, say it like it is, you know, or maybe, but, and I think you can go around and you can call somebody out and be like, I'm pretty sure that person's military.
Yeah.
Specifically for a female too, and just being a strong female, I think.
And I think just like the way you're also taught to kind of live is different. I mean, I think women in general are taught to be a little more observant and like careful of their surroundings, but after being in the military, like my husband, he's always like, how do you notice these things? Like, how do you pick up on all these things? And I'm like, well, for one, I'm a woman, and then I'm a woman that's been in the military, so, you know, I notice a lot of things, and he's like, I don't know how you pay attention to all that or remember all that or connect all the dots all the time. And I think the attention to detail and, you know, kind of being particular about things, because that's how the military's taught you to be, is hard. You know, getting married and then having stepchildren. Like you're used to. I was single the whole time. Well, I was married, but I don't count that. Didn't have any kids or anything. I was only married for 9 months and 10 days, so it was short. But I was single. You know, I had my own house or apartment, and it's like you lived a certain way, and then you have to kind of adjust to letting somebody else live in your space. You know, and even on the ship, you have this much space and your stuff has to be in there, so it's neat, and this is where this goes, and this is how this is, and you're kind of like regimented about things, and you seem rigid to other people.
When you came home and were transitioning, were there any resources that you found to be lacking?
I don't know if it was the same for the Navy. So when we came home, we have the Yellow Ribbon program, and I don't know if that's across the board for the military, if it's just Guard.
I think so.
I know the Army Guard has it. I know my brother has it with the Air Guard. So we would basically come home and you walk through check all the boxes, going through the different stages of all these different resources that you can utilize now that you're home. So I think there are resources. I mean, that's one in particular that I can recall. You know, and I think one of the checklist items was basically you'll go talk to this counselor or a mental health therapist of some sort, and although rather quick eval, but I mean there was those resources I know from when I was in.
As like far as coming home from deployment, the Navy doesn't really do a whole lot of that. I flew off the ship back to the States because I was selected to screen for a special forces program. So I literally flew into San Diego with 2 sea bags and a backpack and sat on the curb and waited for my friend to come pick me up. So I didn't have the fanfare that normally surrounds a Navy ship coming home from deployment. I was sitting there sipping on my Starbucks, glad to be back on American soil, and I just wanted to go home and drink a beer in the shower. That's kind of how I came home from deployment. And so there was no programs, nothing set up. As far as getting ready to get out, you go through like TAP class, which I thought was kind of a waste of time. You have to come up with a budget, which I already did, so I was prepared financially to get out, and I felt like most of it's just like a check in the box that the military can say, well, we did provide you these resources, even though they're not the greatest. Right. And for somebody who just on their own is a prepared kind of a person, it's kind of a waste of time. I don't know, maybe for other people that hadn't thought about some of that stuff, maybe it triggered in them that like, hey, I do need to think about a budget or, my plan. But I think if you're not the one pushing it for yourself, nobody's going to push you to be prepared.
I mean, I think you are offered the resources. I mean, how you utilize and what you make of it, I mean, that's going to fall on you. To be honest, I can't recall what were all these different stages that we went to. I mean, VA home loans, I think we talked about that, and I ended up utilizing that at some point. But I think it's what you make of it, and maybe just more of an introduction to what is out there.
Do you think that men have a tougher time successfully transitioning home than women because they're prone to see more combat? Or do you think that women have a tougher time transitioning home? And if so, what reasons would you contribute that to?
I think we all struggle just in different ways. I think men probably do see more combat. I mean, I was in the Navy, so it's not like we were really on the front lines. But I mean, I knew Navy people that had deployed boots on ground, and So I think it just is different depending on your individual circumstances, like what you went through while you were in and how it's going to affect you getting out. So I think men probably have a harder time accepting resources such as like counseling or, stuff like that to deal with things that they had seen while they were in. I feel like me, being a woman, it was easier for me to go to counseling because it's not as like stigmatized. But that I struggled with being the kind of woman I was because I had been in the military and I didn't fit in with civilian women. So I don't know. I think it's just different depending on your circumstances. I don't think there's like a one size fits all answer to that.
And that sort of brings me up a point. Do you think that it is easier, or do you think that more women seek counseling more than men? Is that maybe, could that contribute to maybe why we're seeing, men end up down these tough roads rather than the women, or more than the women? And I don't know what statistics that could be. If I look at the suicide epidemic, everybody knows about the 22 a day, but, is there a bigger percentage of men that are, committing suicide than female veterans?
I think women, it might be easier to get counseling. I think men, it would be more stigmatized. But I don't know, maybe you can explain. I think it's easier for women to go to their family and admit those kinds of things and have more support from their family than it would be. It wasn't hard for me to talk to my dad. My dad's a Navy veteran. It's not hard for me to tell my dad, that I have a hard time adjusting to this or that. And my mom's been great. My brother, my husband, it's easy for me to open up to them. But I don't think it would be as easy for a son to come home and tell his dad that he's struggling with this or that. I just don't think that that's how society.
Well, I mean,
handles
even
that.
going off of what you're saying too, even with like friends. So as a female, I might be asking my friends about what's going on in my life, whereas I don't know that males are just sitting down talking about what's going on in their mind. Maybe I guess I'm not a guy, but to me, I know I can go to my friends and say whatever's on my mind and talk about it.
Right.
Do guys do that? I don't know.
Well, I mean, I look at it as, to me, it never really made any sense to talk about, what I experienced with a buddy of mine who would have no way to relate.
Mm-hmm.
When my buddies come back or I see them, we were able to talk about it. And, it's even strange that we can talk about some of the really bad stuff that we went through, and like we laugh about it, where if I was to tell a girlfriend or a female friend or even a guy, just a normal friend I graduated high school with, they would, their eyes would be lit up after hearing a story like that. So, but I've been lucky enough to where I don't feel like I've had a lot of my friends. I think they've respected to kind of stay out of that. Everybody always wants to know about it, but I've never really been put on a spot by them. If I've ever been put on the spot, it was by some, person that just blatantly would, ask that stupid question, did you kill anybody type thing. But for me, I feel like I'm able to open up with my dad probably easier than anybody. Why? I don't know, because we're more like best friends than we are father-son. But so that's my experience with it.
Mm-hmm.
So
I would say that I agree with you. I think it is easier for us to talk to like friends or family about it. I mean, a lot of my experiences in the Navy that would be negative would be something that a lot of my civilian women friends would understand, like being treated differently because you're a woman, or the sexual harassment or verbal comments. I think because they experience that too, just in a different context, so it's not so foreign to them. I mean, I was in the Navy, so I wasn't boots on ground, so nobody's ever asked me if I've killed anybody, and I don't have any of those stories to tell. So I think that it's just
Right.
not the same.
I think just like doing these panels, the first panel that we did, we had a bunch of, male soldiers. But basically every single one of them I knew personally or I served with personally. So it's a lot easier for us to get together and talk about things. Not 100% of the group was comfortable doing it, even though, that's you're most comfortable talking to, with your own guys that you served with. The second panel that we did, about half I thought we were going to have a really good turnout, and about half of them just didn't show up, didn't, advise me that they weren't coming. Now we're here today, and half of the people didn't show up, even though they said they were. The questions were a big thing that it seemed like freaked everybody out. Maybe I shouldn't have sent everybody the questions, but I think that pinpoints a major problem. People don't want to talk. They're afraid of the questions. They're afraid to communicate and talk about things. And by, those individuals choosing not to do that, it's not helping them. It's not helping the cause. And, that puts a light bulb to me during this documentary that maybe that is one of the biggest issues. People just can't talk about it. They're uncomfortable. And, if we're not able to do that, we're not going to be allowed to move on mentally, physically, successfully in life.
I mean, I agree. I would not be able to sit here and talk about some of the things I've experienced if I haven't worked through some of that in counseling first. I mean, I'm still emotional about it, and I've been in counseling for over 10 years. So I don't think it's easy to ask people to talk about anything traumatic or that's not, what normal people experience without kind of first working through some of those emotions that they have. Maybe it'll get people to think that they should start working through some of those things if it does, kind of bother them that much to talk about it.